Chapter 10. What did you find out? Stefan looked towards Derek. Several of them were definitely seriously injured, Master, the taller man replied. We don't have any reports of fatalities though, but we definitely have crippled their security force, making them more vulnerable. Good. Stefan's lips curled into a smile. He turned to the other figure next. To Derek. Excellent work. Stefan placed a hand on Victoria's head as she bowed down before him. Thank you, Master, Victoria smiled. I live to serve you, and it wasn't that difficult. She ran a finger over the empty glass bottle in her pocket. Those stupid creatures. A little charm spell here and there was all it took. They're none the wiser. At least not to your presence. Of course, the witch said smugly. But they'll piece everything together. At least the way we want them to. And the security footage? You're sure they'll see her? Yes, my glamour spell should work well enough on the cameras. Victoria tossed her hair over her shoulder. Besides, Cady and I look enough like each other that it shouldn't be too obvious. Perfect, Stefan boomed. We'll soon turn the Lycans against your daughter. And bring her into the fold, Victoria finished. Stefan turned to Derek. And as soon as you finish your part, you'll be on your way to becoming who you were meant to be. To fulfill your destiny. Yes, Master. Derek bowed his head. Miss Gray, line 2 for you. Suzanne's voice crackled through the intercom. Give me a minute, okay, Suzanne? Cady sounded frazzled. Yes, Miss Gray. The redhead huffed, blowing a strand of stray hair away from her face. She was in full crisis mode, and despite the protests from her overly protective Lycan friends, she insisted on going back to work. Cady was having breakfast at home. The next day when she received news, Grant had come by and told her. She was furious that he didn't call her the moment it happened, but he reasoned that it was already handled and that she needed her rest. Cady immediately went to work. There was much to be done, but for now she was now working with Alynna and Alex to find out how the poison had spread and how to track down any humans who might have been affected. Of course, she also had other things on her mind. Her blood ran cold when Grant told her the exact poison, belladonna, a favorite poison and drug among witches. Also the same poison that was given to Alynna at her coming out ball. It was a good thing the Lycan was already pregnant at the time she was poisoned, and carrying a true mate child gave her super invulnerability. So, was her mother's coven behind all of this? Can't have been a coincidence. Victoria's warning rang through her head. It seemed her mother really would do anything, even kill Lycans, to get her back. But what was Victoria's endgame? Threaten to kill Grant? Alynna? Nick? She bit her lip, contemplating telling Grant. No, she couldn't bear it, what it would mean. She'd just have to stop Victoria herself somehow. Miss Gray, line 2, Suzanne reminded her. Right. She picked up the phone. Cady Gray. Hi Cady, this is Claire Fenton, the director for Arch Manor Women's Shelter in Albany. I've been trying to reach you for days, but your assistant said you were unavailable. Hello Claire, she greeted. Cady had never met the woman, but they'd exchanged a lot of phone calls and emails. Yes, I'm sorry. I had a medical emergency. She gave the standard reason she'd been telling everyone. Oh no. I'm so sorry. Are you all right? Yeah, a minor injury, she explained. What can I do for you? Well, I just wanted to remind you that you and Mr. Anderson are set to attend our annual meeting next week up here in Albany. We still have you on our program to receive one of our awards for helping us raise all that money. We'll be naming the new halfway house after Fenrir, of course. Cady cursed in her head. Oh yes. If you can't make it because of your injury, Claire began. Oh no, of course not. Arch Manor was actually her pet project, a cause she had brought up to Grant, which he happily offered to fund through the Fenrir Foundation. They made Grant and herself board members because of their contributions. I'll be there. Of course. She felt a headache coming on. Can you send me the details, please? Yes, to Suzanne. Thanks, Claire. The phone clicked off as she hung up. Cady sighed. One more thing to add to my plate. Cady was swamped with work, so she actually didn't get to telling Grant about the event until the following Monday. Cady, what is it? Grant asked as soon as he picked up the phone. Grant, she began. I wanted to remind you about the Arch Manor event this Friday. We're still on for that, right? His brow wrinkled. Isn't that next week? No, it's this Friday. Did you forget? She asked. They're giving us an award. As I recall, Grant began. The award is for you, and you deserve it, considering all the work you put in. Well, it's for me and Fenrir, she said. But you did put up the money. Grant sighed. Can't we cancel? Or send our regards? Grant, Cady warned. Look, I forgot about it too with everything going on. But we can't not go. They're also naming one of their houses after Fenrir. Why don't you go? Grant suggested. I mean, you did all the work. I don't have to be there, right? It's just way too busy, and you know the security situation will be a nightmare. Cady paused. I suppose I could drive up. Not alone though, he said. I'll have one of our guys drive you up. Can you really spare them? I can always rent a car. Don't be silly, I'm not letting you go alone. Not with what's going on. I'll take care of it, okay? Fine, she sighed. Just tell them to be ready to leave by noon on Friday. Grant put the phone down, shaking his head. What's wrong? Nick asked as he entered the Alpha's office. Sit down. Grant motioned to the chair in front of him. Who on your team is free to go on a trip this Friday? The beta took out his phone and scrolled through the screen. Well, as it stands, nobody. Absolutely no one? Grant asked incredulously. Well, you know what this week is, right? Nick answered. It's Blood Moon on Saturday, in case you forgot. Oh, fuck me, that's right. Grant slapped his forehead. Blood Moon was the one. Night Lycans could not control their shift nor what happened while they were in wolf form. All Lycans all over the world were required to go into special safe houses and safe rooms, ones built to withstand their strength. Right. I'll have to tell Cady there's no way we can have her go up to Albany without a security detail. Wait, Nick said. Cady is going to Albany? We were supposed to go to this event for this women's shelter Fenrir is supporting. It was her pet project, and they're going to give her an award for her work, Grant explained. Well, I could go, Nick volunteered. That's not necessary, Grant said. Cady'll be disappointed, but she'll understand. You don't have to go. It's not a big deal, the blonde Lycan shrugged. Albany's what, 4 hours away? We could drive up on Friday and be back by Saturday before noon if we leave early. Or take the jet back in case something happens. Grant scratched his chin. I suppose that could work. I'll have Jared compile a list of the nearest safe houses just in case. Well, it shouldn't have to come to that, but it'll be good to be prepared. Chapter 11. Is the temperature okay? Are you comfortable? Nick asked. He kept his eyes on the road but glanced over at the redhead in the front passenger seat. I'm fine, she replied. I could have driven myself, you know. With your injuries? Nick retorted. I don't think so. Cady grumbled and sank back in her seat. Damn you, Grant, she cursed the Alpha silently. She knew they were spread thin, so she thought he might send a junior driver or trainee. To her surprise, on Friday at noon, Nick Frost was waiting for her outside the enclave, his black Mercedes already fueled up and ready to go. She had a mind to cancel right then and there, but she couldn't do that to Claire and Arch Manor. It was about a 4-hour trip with stops, plus it would only be overnight. The plan was to drive up on Friday, accept the award that evening, and be on their way back by Saturday. Surely she could stand to be in his company for a little over 24 hours. I have to stop for gas. Nick slowed the car down and maneuvered it into the rest stop. They were about halfway there. Cady said nothing as he left the car to pay for the gas. After a few minutes, Nick slipped into the driver's seat. When he turned on the engine, the radio began blasting. And in other news, some weather stations are reporting we might actually see some snow this weekend. The male anchor on the radio news program announced. Wow, James, this early? The female replied. No one knows yet, dash. Nick turned the volume down from the controls on his steering wheel. Sorry, too loud? Cady massaged her temple with her fingers. It's fine. I'm fine. Usually when a woman says fine, it means trouble for the man, he quipped. She shrugged and leaned her head against the cool window. There was more uncomfortable silence that followed, which suited Cady just fine. It was already driving her slightly mad sitting next to him, his spicy, fur-scented aftershave filling her nostrils. Nick also took off his jacket and rolled up his sleeves for the long drive, exposing his forearms. The muscles underneath shifted and flexed as he drove the car expertly, and she couldn't help glance over once in a while. It was distractingly sexy. She just hoped the next 24 hours would pass quickly. Finally, Nick cleared his throat. You've never met my grandfather before, have you? No, I haven't, she said curtly. He's very traditional, Nick began. My grandmother was definitely more forward-thinking, and she knew how to best manage him. There was a warmth and softness in his voice that made Cady's frozen resolve melt a little bit. How long has it been since she died? About 12 years. I'm sorry. She truly meant it. It was hard on him. They'd been together for more than 50 years, Nick explained. And in the last couple of years he's been thinking a lot about family and legacy. That's normal. Cady shifted in her seat to face him. They both raised. You mentioned. He nodded. Yes, after my parents were killed. Was it an accident? Curiosity got the better of her. No, they were murdered. She let out a soft cry and covered her mouth. Oh my lord, I'm sorry, Nick. Not knowing what else to do, she put a hand on his arm. Did they find out who it was? Yes, they did. 3 rogue witches chased them down while they were on vacation. I was left at home with my grandparents. Cady's blood froze in her veins. Witches. Nick's parents were killed by witches. The words rang in her head over and over again, blocking out everything else. And so I lived with my grandmother and grandfather. What happened to the witches? Did she really want to know? The Lycan High Council wanted justice, of course, he said. But they weren't going to risk war, so they let the witch assembly deal with them. They were executed. My grandfather was there, and Michael Anderson was one of the witnesses. Cady's vision swam in front of her, imagining what type of execution they used. I'm so sorry. I'm glad you got justice. Why was Nick telling her this? I was very young. I don't remember them. His voice was even but had an edge. My grandparents raised me, and I owe them everything. Of course, she nodded. That's why. He hesitated. Well, my grandfather's getting older. He's been clamoring for me to settle down. Ah, I see. A strange pain ached in her chest at the thought of Nick settled down and married. That's probably normal, right? And well, he's gotten more insistent. He gave me an ultimatum a few weeks ago. Find a mate and have a pup, or else he'll give away his fortune and the only home I ever knew. Cady's jaw dropped. He can't do that, can he? Nick nodded. Of course he can. He owns everything from the businesses to the Hudson house. I'm not strapped for cash, my parents made sure, but since he never passed it on to my father, the house is his to give away. She didn't know what to say. So many thoughts processing through her mind. Witches. His parents. Vasily. And then something clicked. I'm sure Madison would make a great wife. He chuckled. My grandfather thought so too. Except she's not interested in me. Cady huffed. Of course. Well, she can keep trying, but no one's tying Grant down anytime soon. She'd seen it a dozens of times in the past decade. All these Lycan women fawning over the alpha of New York, hoping they'd be selected and become his lupa, as one who was wife to the leader was called. They all failed, of course. Actually, she was interested in you. The redhead looked at him, astonished. Me? Yes, he glanced at her. You made an impression, apparently, and she's been meaning to look you up. Cady blinked at his words. She thought back to that meeting at the lobby, the way Madison leaned towards her, touching her on the arm and hair. Should I give her your number? Nick teased, noting the way Cady's cheeks turned pink. She turned away, trying to hide her blush. You're joking. Madison is a gorgeous girl. Educated, smart, and funny, he recalled. Cady rolled her eyes. I'm flattered, but no. Besides, I don't think Senator Crawford would approve of me as an in-law. Do you think he knows? She asked. Nick nodded. Sounded like it, but still expects her to do her duty to the clan. Cady felt sad for the lovely Lycan. I hope he changes his mind and she finds someone. Not you then, he teased again. She laughed, and the tension around them seemed to ease. She and I could share clothes and bags, but other than that, I don't see any other benefits. The rest of the trip passed by in more comfortable silence, though they got by on some small talk. They arrived at the Albany Spa and Resort, where the event was taking place and where they were also checked in for the night. After settling into their individual rooms, Cady freshened up and changed into her outfit, which was a simple dark blue gown and pearl earrings. She didn't want to look ostentatious. After all, this was a charity event to benefit a women's shelter, and most of the people in attendance were also CEOs and business owners. Nick dutifully escorted her to the event, dressed in one of his gorgeous tuxes, and was as charming as he could be. Her speech was a smashing success, and many of the people in the audience came to her to congratulate her on the award. She could have sworn Nick beamed at her in pride, though she was too busy chatting with other guests and encouraging them to donate more for the next fiscal year to focus her attention on him. There was some dancing and music afterwards, and though she danced with a couple of CEOs and fended off some advances which she was used to, she never got a chance to dance with Nick. For one thing, he never asked, and he seemed busy networking in Grant's stead. Finally, when she had stayed an acceptable amount of time, she headed up to her room and got ready for Chapter 12. "Good morning, Cady," Nick greeted as she stepped out of her hotel room. Seemed like he had been standing there waiting for her. The redhead checked her watch. It was 8 a.m. on the dot. "Good morning," she greeted back. Before she could protest, Nick grabbed her wheeled bag. When they reached the lobby, Cady's eyes widened in surprise at the sight of about 30 people at the reception area. People were angry, pleading, and a woman was sitting in one of the chaise lounges, speaking frantically into her cell phone. "What's happening?" Cady asked. "Let me find out." Nick placed their bags to the side. "Stay here." Cady stood in a corner, watching Nick make his way to the reception desk. When he got to the front, he spoke with the ragged-looking receptionist. After a few minutes, he made his way back to her. His face was dour and shoulders tense. "It's a freak snowstorm." "What?" Cady finally looked outside. She didn't get a chance this morning as her blackout curtains had been closed. Snowflakes whipped in the air, sticking to the windows, the trees, everything. It was a winter wonderland out there, but it seemed everyone inside the hotel was trapped in hell. "What are they saying?" "All the main roads are out. No one's driving out of Albany or even flying out today. Airports are closed too." Nick's voice was edgy and strained. "Shit," Cady cursed. She was stuck in Albany for at least one more night. With Nick Frost squaring her shoulders, she decided to take matters into her own hand and whipped out her best weapon, her phone, and began to dial. Cady, being efficient and well-connected, exhausted all her connections. Luxury car rental place, a private jet company, even the local Albany government. But no dice. Snow was over 6 feet in some areas, and since no one was expecting this freak storm, the plows weren't prepared. They had only just began clearing the roads, but only for emergency services and routes to hospitals. Plus, the snow continued to fall. No one was getting out of Albany. At least not for another few hours. "Any luck?" Nick's face was pained. The redhead shook her head. "The best I can do is get us an empty suite here. Since they've already begun giving out the rooms to guests who are stuck. It'll be ready in a few hours. It's a 1-bedroom, but there's a pull-out couch. I can sleep there. We'll figure it out later, okay?" Nick took their bags. "Let's eat some breakfast and go get settled in." As soon as they entered the suite, Nick went straight to the bathroom inside the lone bedroom, leaving a puzzled Cady in the main room. His hands were shaking as he turned the tap on. Rolling up his sleeves, he splashed his face with cold water. "Fuck," he cursed, wanting to punch the mirror. "Motherfucker." He pounded on the marble sink with his fists. Taking a few deep breaths, he fished his phone out of his pocket. Hopefully Cady was not on the phone with Grant yet. "Nick," Grant greeted as he answered. "How's the drive? Are you on your way?" "No," Nick gritted his teeth. "Did you see the news? There's a freak snowstorm. All the roads are snowed in, and so are all the nearby airports." "Fuck. Nick, you can't possibly be stuck there today of all days." "I know." Nick rubbed his temples. "I know. Can you do anything?" There was a pause. "Hold on. I'll call you back." It felt like he waited an eternity before his phone rang back. "Anything." "Sorry, Nick, all runways are closed. There's snow everywhere. I can't even send a chopper over." "God damn it." "Me?" Grant hesitated. "You need to put Cady on the phone." "No." Nick wanted to smash his cell phone. He knew what Grant would say. "We have a few hours. If we can leave here by 3 p.m., we'll make it to New York by evening." And if not, well, there has to be another way. Swear to me on your father's grave, you won't call her until you find another way. There was silence from the other end. For Nick to invoke such a vow meant he was serious. As his friend and as a member of the New York clan, Grant could not deny such a request. I'll talk to Dr. Faulkner, but for now stay away from her, okay? The Alpha ordered. Yes, Primal. Nick complied and put the phone down. Motherfucker, he cursed. Again, and this time he smashed his fist into the mirror. Blood ran down his knuckles, but he didn't care. Of all the times to get stuck in a freak snowstorm with Cady Gray, it had to be during a blood moon. Cady watched Nick retreat into the bedroom when they entered the suite. Well, I thought it was going to be a big fight over who was going to stay on the couch, but apparently Nick Frost liked his comforts. She shrugged and settled down into the couch, unpacking a few of her things. At least it was a nice living room, plush and well appointed. As she turned on the TV, she tuned into the local news channel, which of course featured only the snowstorm. After an hour, Nick hadn't left the bedroom. Maybe he was tired? She realized she hadn't seen him last night after the party. Did Nick stay up all night with some female company? The thought brought a sharp pain in her gut. No, can't think about that. Cady had made a decision. From this point on, her relationship with Nick would remain 100% professional. She would not joke with him, tease him, and avoid any contact outside work. It was bad enough that witches had killed his parents, but even if she was fully human, it wouldn't have worked out. Nick obviously was determined to keep his legacy, and fantasizing that anything would happen between them would only lead to heartbreak. And when he did find his Lycan wife and have his pup, she would smile and give her congratulations, never giving away any hint of any emotions. The lump in her throat grew, but she pushed it down. Yes, she would harden her heart against Nick Frost and move on with her life. An hour turned into a few hours and she clicked off the TV. Her stomach grumbled and she realized she hadn't eaten anything since breakfast. Outside, it had grown dark, though the snow had slowed down to light flurries. Walking to the bedroom, she knocked on the door. Nick, she called. I'm going to order some food. Do you want anything? No, came the reply. I'm not hungry. His voice sounded shaky and Cady knew something was wrong. Nick, what's going on? Are you sick? Should I call a doctor? Don't, came the anguished cry. When Cady heard his voice, she began to panic. She grabbed the doorknob, but it was locked. Nick, open this door now. She rapped her knuckles hard on the wood. Stay away, Cady. For God's sake, leave me alone. And find another room. What in the world is going on? Open this door now, or... There was some rustling coming from the inside, and then she heard silence. I'm calling Grant, she threatened. When he didn't answer, she picked up her cell phone from the coffee table. Cady, finally. Grant sounded frantic. What did Nick tell you? Nick? Nothing. What's going on? There was a short pause. Oh fuck. He made me swear an oath I wouldn't call you, so I was hoping you would call me. Cady, tonight's the blood moon. What? Cady's knees buckled and she sank down onto the couch. Why didn't she remember? Oh Lord, her pad and her phone were destroyed in the car crash. She must have forgotten to update all her apps and alerts when she got her replacement devices. Suzanne wouldn't have warned her, as her assistant was unaware of Lycans. Her hands began to shake. In a few hours there would be a fully formed wild animal in the room next to hers, one with giant teeth and claws. Grant, what do we do? The hotel is full of guests and staff right now. Jesus. I know, Grant said in a frustrated voice. Cady, we're about to head into the safe rooms, and well, you won't have any contact with any of us. I'm making sure everyone goes in first, and Dr. Faulkner and I will be the last ones in. Grant, we have to do something. Nick could go on a rampage. Her mouth went dry. She had never seen Nick's wolf form. In fact, she'd only seen Lycans shift a handful of times, but she knew it wouldn't be pretty. They were risking lives and their secret if Nick were to get out or hurt anyone in the hotel. Wooden doors and locks couldn't stop a Lycan. What can I do, Grant? Are there any safe houses nearby? The only thing that could contain a rampaging Lycan were safe house and safe rooms that were built to withstand their razor-sharp teeth and gigantic claws. Otherwise they would shred through wood, glass, and event drywall. We've been working on it all afternoon, Cady. The closest one is at least 2 Hours away, and the roads are blocked there too, Grant explained. We thought. Well, Nick insisted on driving you and we put all these precautions, but we weren't prepared for a snowstorm. Oh God, Nick drove me because I wanted to go. It's all my fault. There must be something we can do. Cady panicked. There was a pause and Cady knew Grant so well that she knew he was holding back. There is something, isn't there? Tell me now, Grant, she threatened, or I'll call the police and have Nick locked up in the local jail because metal bars might be the only thing that can hold him. But that would mean exposing the Lycans, and you better be prepared to deal with that. Grant let out a defeated breath. I'll have Dr. Faulkner explain it to you. There was silence as he passed the phone to the older Lycan. Cady, Tom Faulkner's voice was grave. Dr. Faulkner, tell me what I need to do, she said in a determined voice. Cady, dear. Dr. Faulkner hesitated. You know what happens during the blood moon? Nick is going to start to shift soon. He'll probably try to stop it, which will cause him great pain. He might even go mad, or he could die, or attempt to kill himself to protect you, the people around him, and the clan. He's going to become a full wolf with no control, and he might not remember everything once the blood moon is over. How do I stop it? She bit her lip. Well, there is one sure way. You need to give him what he wants, what his wolf instinct wants, food, drink, and allow him to give in to his sexual needs. Her heart slammed into her chest and she sank back further into the couch. Dear. Faulkner didn't have to explain any further. And you're sure that will stop him from shifting? Yes, you might. And I'm sorry to say this. You might have to keep him, occupied throughout the night, until the blood moon wanes, which could be a few hours. But it was how our ancestors dealt with the blood moon before we had the technology to build safe rooms. Cady's mouth went dry. I understand. I'm sorry to ask this of you, Cady, Grant said as he came back on the phone. I'm really, really sorry. He sounded choked up. If there was another way. Please, Grant, don't. She wanted to cry as well. I'll take care of it, okay? Just go into the safe rooms. I know Alynna will need you now as well. She thought of the pregnant young Lycan. So please, and don't tell anyone. I mean, I know you won't. We'll deal with the aftermath later, okay? Grant promised. And whatever you want, whatever you decide, I'll make it happen. And Nick? He's stubborn as hell. He knew about it and refused to have you deal with it. We tried, we really did. Another stab of hurt went through her. Of course Nick didn't want her. She should have known, but hearing it cemented the realization. I know you did. Bye, Grant. She put the phone down. Cady pushed away all other thoughts. Right. Now she needed to focus to save the clan, the innocent people at the hotel, and Nick. Chapter 14. Cady couldn't wait to get home. Confused, tired, and overwhelmed, all she wanted to do was sit in her tub at home and soak for hours. Nick's scent seemed to permeate her skin and it was driving her mad. Part of her still craved for him, for his touch. She had to wash it away, if only so she could think straight. As she sat surrounded by bubbles and her favorite scented oils, she contemplated the situation. What could she do? Pretend everything was normal? Quit? The best case scenario was maybe Nick wouldn't remember a thing and they could just go on as they did before. She sank into the bubbles further. Talk about being stuck between a rock and a hard place. She would just have to take it a day at a time. Monday came and she was actually glad to go to work and have something to do. The good news was, since it was after a blood moon, about half the Lycan staff would be gone. She didn't hear any word from Dr. Faulkner about Nick's condition, but she figured no news was good news. Grant didn't take the day off. He never did after a blood moon, and as Alpha, it was luxury he couldn't afford. But she knew he was out of the office at meetings the whole day. Alynna and Alex had definitely taken the day off, but the young couple assured her in a text message that they were fine and so was the baby, but stayed at home as an extra precaution. The next few days were a bit tricky, but she managed to avoid Grant and Nick. The beta was probably back at work, seeing as she saw the new security rotation list. Since she had access to both men's schedule, she worked it out so she could avoid them. If Grant wanted to see her, he made no indication, only communicating with her through email, and she heard nothing from Nick at all. While she was disappointed, she was also relieved. Grant's avoidance, however, almost hurt. But what did she expect anyway? A clap on the back? An award? Of course she knew any meeting with Grant right now would just be awkward. In the middle of the week when she knew both men would be at the office, Cady scheduled to work from home and then come in the afternoon. Before she stepped into Fenrir's building that day though, she decided to take a walk around the block to the nearby coffee shop, where she knew the peppermint mochas were most definitely in season even this early. She was about to push the door open when it swung out, almost knocking her to the ground. A strong pair of arms caught her before she hit the pavement. Apologies, the deep masculine voice said. Cady brushed her hair away and looked up into blue-green eyes behind a pair of glasses. No worries. No harm, no foul, right? When the man propped her back up, she realized how tall and imposing he was. He was probably 3 or 4 inches over 6 feet, with broad shoulders. His long, dark blonde hair was tied up in a fashionable man bun, showing off a handsome face for sure, if a little humorless. Are you sure you're all right? A slight accent, UK educated maybe, but he looked more like a Viking than a Brit. She was usually good at accents, but she couldn't place this one for some reason. He was also dressed like a hipster with ripped jeans, a tight shirt, suede jacket and a checkered scarf around his neck. Yes, I'm fine. She brushed imaginary dirt off herself. Thanks for the catch. He nodded and said nothing. Have a good day. Cady shrugged and went inside the coffee shop, getting in line at the counter. 1 peppermint mocha, please. With extra whipped cream, she told the barista. As soon as she reached the front of the counter, when she slipped her hand inside her purse, she realized that she didn't have her wallet. Just my luck. But before she could tell the barista to cancel her order, someone tapped her on the shoulder. Excuse me. It was hipster Viking. I think you dropped this. In his hands was her wallet. Oh, thank God. She grabbed it from him with a grateful nod. It would have been terrible to lose all her stuff. Thank you so much. No problem. He gave her a short nod and turned around, leaving the coffee shop. Strange guy, she thought. Seemed nice enough. She shrugged and paid for her drink. Did you get it? Derek waited until he was 2 blocks away from the coffee shop. He whipped off the glasses and the ridiculous scarf. Relax, came the voice from the communicator in his ear. Some punk kid Victoria hired who seemed to be obsessed with spy movies. I've got the info. Dude, the guy was good though. All Derek needed to do was grab Cady's wallet, place her card next to a special reader, and they had an exact copy of her access card. Good. I want to get out of here, he said impatiently. Why the rush? Victoria Chatrain smiled wolfishly at him as she rounded the corner from where he was. I don't like cities and this outfit is ridiculous. Derek threw the scarf and glasses into the nearest trash can. And I don't understand why we needed to spoof her keycard. We have magic. Derek, darling. Victoria placed a hand on his arm. You know why. Magic and glamour will only take us so far. Anyone who's familiar with witches or another witch will be able to see through the glamour once they review security tapes. But, she paused, when they see the real hard evidence they won't be able to deny it. Humph. Besides, she drawled, what did you think of Cady? Will she do? Her bloodline is suitable enough, at least the master seems to think so. Derek replied. But do you think she's attractive? She asked, her bright red painted lips curling into a smile. That shouldn't matter, right? The blonde warlock knitted his brows. I mean, if you find her attractive. Victoria stroked his arm, her voice full of meaning. Derek's face was a solid mask of indifference. Let's go back, the master will want to know what happened. As soon as she thought the coast was clear, Cady returned to Fenrir. She entered the building, crossed the lobby and headed to the private elevators. When she turned the corner, she saw a familiar, tall, dark-haired figure waiting by the elevators. Alpha, welcome to New York. She nodded reverently at Liam Henny, Alpha of San Francisco, and Alynna's one-time would-be suitor. All right. He was scheduled to meet with Grant and Alynna regarding Amidst Ventures. Grant and Alynna were both funding his startup, and the latter even had a seat on the board. He was dressed in a smart business suit in charcoal gray, though the jacket was slung over one arm, a rolling case and briefcase right beside him. Good afternoon, Miss Gray, he greeted back. The elevator doors opened and he struggled to enter and drag his things in at the same time. Can I help you, Alpha? She asked. Yes, please. Liam handed her his jacket and Cady hugged it against her chest as he maneuvered his bags into the elevator. Sorry, he said, rubbing the back of his head with his palm. I'm on Amidst business, not clan business. Had to fly commercial this trip, just got in from JFK, he explained. Startup mode, right? Cady joked. They made small talk, with her inquiring about his trip from the West Coast, and Liam asking for restaurant recommendations for dinner near his hotel. The trip up was quick and soon they reached the top floor of Fenrir Corp. Have a good meeting and rest of your trip, Alpha. Cady handed his jacket back to him, which he quickly put on. Thank you, Miss Gray, I'll see you around. He gave her a nod before they headed in opposite directions. So, looks like we're ready for the next step in our project, Grant concluded. As he leaned back in his chair casually, Liam and Alynna sat in the chairs across from him. We're in good shape. Thanks for coming, Liam. My pleasure. Liam stood up and offered his hand to the other Alpha. I'll be headed to San Francisco early tomorrow morning, but with the new lab results coming in, I should be back again soon. Excellent. Grant clasped his hands and gave it a firm shake. Looking forward to seeing what results we have, Alynna interjected. You really can't stay longer. The San Francisco Alpha shook his head. Sorry, duty calls, I'm afraid. All right, well, let me walk you to the elevators at least. She tucked her arm in his and led him towards the door. As soon as the door closed, Grant turned to Nick, who had been standing stiff as a board in his usual spot in the corner. Now, are you going to tell me why you look like you're going to murder Liam? Henny. The beta tensed, a tick in his jaw showing how hard he was trying to keep his anger in check. It's nothing. Nothing at all. Grant shook his head and went to his liquor cabinet, taking out a special key from the drawer and opening a secret compartment. Taking out a pure black quarter-liter bottle, he filled a shot glass halfway, then walked over and handed it to Nick. You never take out the good stuff. Nick sniffed the liquid. You look like you need the good stuff, Grant said. It was Torlinka, like a supercharged version of vodka, made in secret from the old country and infused with old magic, or at least that's what Lycans believed. Nick swallowed everything in one gulp, the liquor going down smoothly. Smoother than any alcohol in the world. He felt his shoulders relax and he sank down on the nearest chair he could find. Now tell me what's going on, Grant said in an authoritative manner. Why are you so worked up? He couldn't exactly compel Nick to talk to him, but he hoped the liquor would help loosen Nick's tongue. He smells like her. I could scent it the moment he walked in the door. Nick wished he had another swig of that drink. Smells like her. Cady. You know, like caramel apples. Nick grunted in disgust. I don't know how, but it was like he had been all over her, touching her. Grant gave him a puzzled look. First, I don't know why you think Cady has a scent, and second, why would it be all over Liam Henny? I don't think he's the type to try and get over one woman by going after her friend. Although Liam had failed to secure his sister's affections, Grant thought the other Lycan took it in stride. He also never gave any indication he was interested in Cady. The blonde Lycan felt his head spinning. The Torlinka was taking its effect. But thank God that with the amount he drank, it would only last a few minutes. I don't know. Maybe I was imagining things. But goddammit, he threw the shot glass to the ground, the pieces shattering all over the hardwood floors. Everywhere I go, I'm imagining her, seeing her, smelling her. I can't get her out of my mind. Sitting down across from his beta, Grant shook his head. Maybe this is a side effect of. I'm so sorry, Nick. I'm sorry. I'm not the one you should be saying sorry to. I know I should apologize to Cady, and I did, Grant bowed his head. She doesn't want to see me either. I talked to her assistant and it seems she's been keeping tabs on our schedules, working around it. Can you blame her? After what I did? Nick trailed. Did you hurt her? Grant's voice suddenly turned edgy. No, of course not. Nick stood up and walked towards the windows. There are certain things that are hers alone to tell you, but both you and I know she was pushed into this by circumstance. She was doing her duty and protecting everyone around us and the clan. If there had been another way. Grant was still obviously anguished by the decision. I know. You tried. Well, there wasn't, and we can't turn back time. Nick curled his hands into fists. I just wish it didn't have to go that way. He turned to Grant. but I don't regret a moment of what happened between us. I've wanted her from the beginning, since I saw her that first time. The alpha seemed surprised at the revelation. Well, why didn't you do anything about it? Nick laughed sardonically. After you told me she was your little sister? Thought that was a warning. It was, Grant recalled. I know your track record and the effect Cady has on men. The beta shrugged. And so, out of respect for you and the position you gave me, I treated her with the same respect as I would anyone in your family. Couldn't seduce her, no matter how much I wanted her. But all this time? You've never even slept with anyone else? Grant asked. Incredulously. Nick shot him a look. I'm your beta, not a monk, Grant. I've just been selective and very discreet. He never slept with the same woman twice in the last 10 years, all one-night stands and outside New York City if possible. Still, it's been a decade. You've changed and so has she. Grant paused. Why did you never go after her? Does it matter? Nick asked soberly, as the effects of the liquor began to fade. Maybe if I did from the beginning things might be different. Maybe we would have gotten over it and moved on. Both you and I know in my position, it wouldn't have been appropriate. We have to make this right somehow, Grant said solemnly. Before Nick could answer, Alynna burst into the room. I forgot my purse, she grabbed the black bag by Grant's desk. Whoa! She looked at the floor. Covered in glass. Who's the Butterfingers? I'll get someone to clean that up, Primal, Nick said before he walked out of Grant's office. Is everything all right? Alynna eyed her brother suspiciously. You two have been walking on eggshells around each other all week. It's all good, Grant lied and then changed the subject. Everything okay with Liam? She nodded. Yup, he says he's gonna head back to his hotel. Oh, and thanks for sending Alex off on that errand, by the way. He was driving me crazy ever since I told him about the meeting with Liam. She dug through her bag, her face lighting up as she found what she was looking for, a candy bar. Apparently, incubating a Lycan pup took up a lot of energy and she was eating 24 hours a day. He was starting to mark his territory. She scarfed down the entire thing in 2 bites. Jesus, Alynna, Grant wrinkled his nose. I do not need to know how kinky you guys get. Not that way, you pervert. Alynna tossed the wrapper at Grant. I mean, he was rubbing his wrists all over me this morning. He thinks I won't notice he's trying to cover me with his scent. As if my scent hasn't already changed. Being knocked up with a magical Lycan baby and all. Anyway, she gave her brother a pleading look, one that she knew he couldn't resist. I'm starving. How about an early dinner? Think you can spare a few minutes to feed me and your ravenous soon-to-be niece or nephew? She rubbed the non-existent bump on her stomach. He gave her a warm smile and pushed thoughts of Cady and Nick away. Of course. Let's go. Chapter 16. Neither of them decided that they would spend the entire weekend together, but that was what ended up happening. Friday rolled into Saturday and then Sunday. Cady was tired and sore in a good way. She did, however, threaten to go back to her apartment and lock Nick out if he didn't let her sleep before work on Monday. Not wanting to be away from her, he relented and they went to bed early on Sunday night. She'd never slept better than she did in his arms. They arrived separately at Fenrir, and Cady went straight to her office. She was surprised to see Grant was already waiting for her. Grant! Her eyes widened at the sight of him sitting on her couch. Cady! He stood up. How have you been? I'm good, and you? Fine. She walked to her desk. Is there something I can help you with? I know you've been avoiding me. Me and Nick, I mean. He sounded nervous. Something she'd never seen. She sighed as she sat down. No. I mean yes. She wouldn't insult him by lying or patronizing him. I needed some space, I hope you understand. But as I told you, I'm okay. I mean, I went into this willingly. I did it to keep everyone safe and for the clan. I know, and I'm grateful. Grant cleared his throat. But I can't help but feel at fault. Well, don't, because it's not your fault, she assured him. It's no one's fault. And we can't change the past. What do you want to do now? He asked. I don't want to lose you as my assistant or liaison, but if things are too awkward, then I'll understand. What? Her head shot up so fast she was almost dizzy. Did you want me to quit? No, he protested. Of course not. Do you want to quit? No, I don't, Cady stated. Nick and I will work it out. We just need time. She contemplated telling him, but it didn't seem like a good idea. Besides, what was she supposed to say? Actually, Grant, we're working it out by screwing each other silly. Good, he stood up. I'd hate to lose either one of you. You won't, she assured him. We're all adults here. Anytime you change your mind, he began. Just tell me. The redhead nodded. I will. Grant seemed slightly relieved. Good. Now let's go over the calendar for the next few days, okay? The footage from the accident is arriving today, right? Alynna asked her husband. Uh-huh. And the list of witnesses? Uh-huh. And the list of humans who got sick? And the footage from Blood Moon? Working on it. Alynna pushed Alex away playfully. Hey, what did I say about getting handsy? In the office. That you enjoyed it? Alex tickled her, eliciting a shriek from his wife. But she stepped away from him and crossed his arms. Alex sighed. We need to stay professional while in Fenrir. Right. She pulled down her skirt, which Alex had raised up over her hips. She pointed to his desk. Back to work, mister. You're no fun. He mock-pouted and sat down on his chair. You know this is important, she said, her voice taking on a serious tone. I know, baby doll, but I don't want you to get too anxious and stress out the baby, okay? He replied. Plus, doesn't relaxing help you think better? Is sex the only way you relax? She raised an eyebrow at him. No, but it's the best way, hey. Alex ducked when she tossed a pencil at him. He picked it up, grumbling something about husband abuse. Alynna sat back down in her chair, staring at her computer screen, trying to put together what they had so far. She frowned. How come we don't have the footage from Blood Moon? That was over 2 weeks ago. Well, they don't actually have in-house security. Grant is only part owner of the club, and the decision from the management was to outsource security. Alex explained. Still, Alynna narrowed her eyes. It can't be difficult to get the footage? According to the security company, all the footage is on an external server. And, Alex opened his email. Well, they sent me this email. Having trouble downloading the server. Sincere apologies, blah blah. Endeavoring to get it to you ASAP. He turned back to Alynna. I can see the wheels in your head turning. It seems all too weird to me. She was interrupted by a knock on the door. Come in. Mr. Westbrook, Miss Chase, Westbrook. It was Jared, Grant's admin. Since neither Alynna nor Alex had time to interview applicants for assistance, he was doing double duty, which was fine for the time being since they didn't have many cases yet. This came for you from the NYPD. The handsome young Lycan handed her a slim envelope. Thank you, Jared, Alynna nodded. And thank you, Lycan Connections. I would have had to break some laws if I wanted to get this on my own as a PI. Did you? Alex teased. Break laws, I mean? She tore open the envelope. I have to keep some secrets to myself. Right. Before Alex could answer, she popped the DVD into the drive of her computer and pulled him beside her. They sat in silence as they watched the grainy, black and white footage from the traffic cam. It showed a section of road on the West Side Highway, which was strangely empty for that time of the day. The black town car approached the traffic camera, which was probably mounted overhead. As it was halfway out of frame, the back end of the car fishtailed and disappeared from view. That's it. Alynna frantically clicked on the computer. That's all we have? Afraid so. Alex put a hand on her shoulder. The next camera was too far away to capture anything. So whatever caused Greg to swerve was in the one blind spot between cameras. Alex's brows knitted. Seems like it. And Greg still doesn't remember? Alex shook his head. Nick interviewed the young Lycan driver as soon as he woke up from his induced coma 2 days after the accident. However, he had not provided any useful information, other than that he had swerved to avoid something, but he couldn't remember what it was. An examination of the car showed that it was clean and had not been tampered with. This is all too fishy. Alynna tapped a finger on her chin. Could it be all coincidence? Alex suggested. You know I don't believe in coincidences. Finally, Grant said as he poured himself another cup of coffee. There's one more thing. Yes? Cady asked without looking up from her pad. I've been invited to a dinner party tonight for some visiting Lycans from Europe. Vasily Vrost is hosting. I'd like you to come as my date. I'm sorry to have to ask, but you know I don't have anyone else. It wasn't uncommon after all for them to go to business or Lycan-related functions together, especially since Grant had no lupa. Her breath caught for a moment, but she continued. Oh, I didn't realize you had that in your calendar. Nick hadn't mentioned anything, only that he wouldn't be home tonight. She had been planning to stay in, read a book, and drink some wine. It was a last-minute invite. It's a bit much to ask this of you right now, Grant said sheepishly. And I know you don't like Vasily. She thought about what he was doing to Nick, forcing him to do something he didn't want. Don't worry, it's fine. And I don't know him enough to like him. But he obviously doesn't like me very much. I think he underestimates you, he said. Why weren't these Lycan visitors cleared in advance? She asked, switching topics. Usually when you have some sort of delegation, it takes weeks to get everything together. Vasily requested it, and he said it would be to talk business too, but nothing formal. We've had some minor business in the past, but he's mostly in Europe. I have a feeling. Grant stopped short. Yes. Cady looked up from her pad. Well, I shouldn't be discussing this, but maybe he wants to solidify our partnership when Nick takes over. You're right, you shouldn't be discussing this, Cady interrupted. Grant would obviously know about Vasily's ultimatum to Nick, but didn't realize she did too. Did Nick already give his grandfather an indication that he had found his potential Lycan wife? A stab of jealousy went through her. If it's all too much right now, I can always beg Alynna to come, Grant offered. Don't be silly, Grant, Cady sighed. I'm an adult. We're all adults. Besides, I can't think of anything worse to put your sister through. Alynna hated any society-type event where she'd have to make small talk and pretend she was enjoying herself. She'd rather be at home eating pizza. Besides, if there's any Lycan or Fenrir business to be discussed, I should be there too. Great, Grant stood up. Pick you up at 5? It's a long drive upstate. Cady wasn't quite sure what to expect when she arrived at the Vrost family home, but it certainly wasn't a restored 120-year-old 25-room mansion sitting on 100 acres with spectacular views of the river and the Catskills. She exited the town car. Her breath caught as she stared up at the stately facade. All the lights were on and the mansion looked absolutely stunning. It was done in Beaux-Arts style with arched windows, cornices, and the front door was framed by 4 large columns topped a triangular pediment with tasteful ornamentation. This was where Nick Vrost grew up, the childhood home he was desperate to keep, and she understood why. Beautiful, huh? Grant whispered as they ascended the front porch. You should think about getting one, Cady joked. I think one mansion is enough, Grant replied, referring to the Anderson mansion in Long Island. In New York, you mean? Cady quipped. The Andersons own numerous homes, some of them mansions around the world. Still, she thought most of them, the one she'd seen anyway, didn't quite have the character of this one. They walked up to the front door, which was answered by an older man with white hair dressed in a tuxedo. Alpha, good evening. He greeted Grant with a bow. Welcome, please come in. Thank you, Grant greeted. This is my dinner companion for the evening. Cady Gray. Cady smiled at the older man. This must be the butler, Garrett, whom Nick spoke so fondly about. Good evening, Miss Gray, he said. His accent was very British, as if he just stepped off the plane yesterday, not decades ago. How was your trip up? Good evening. Garrett, right? The older man nodded an affirmative. It was fine, thank you. Excellent. He bowed again. Please come this way, everyone is already here, having pre-dinner drinks in the drawing room. Grant's brows raised at Cady's use of the butler's name. I didn't know you knew Garrett. Cady cursed her slip internally. Nick mentioned him before. I just remembered. The Lycan said nothing more as they entered the drawing room. It was a beautiful space, well matched to the exterior and what other interiors Cady had observed on their way there. Everything looked original, probably restored to its 19th century grandeur. It wasn't gaudy but classy, and Cady felt like she was transported back in time. There were already several people in the library, including Vasily Vrost and, of course, Nick. He looked particularly handsome in his formal tux, and her heart skipped a beat, watching him as he spoke with his grandfather and a few other men. Ah, Primal, Vasily greeted as they came closer. You honor us with your Presents. He turned to Cady, and if he was surprised that she was there, he didn't show it. Miss Gray, you look stunning. Thank you, Mr. Vrost, she said with a slight blush. She had taken care of her appearance tonight, wearing a long light blue draped jersey dress with one shoulder. The fabric hugged her curves, showing them off. Her makeup was carefully, but only minimally applied to enhance her looks, and her red hair swept to one side. If Vasily wasn't surprised to see her, Nick sure was. He stared at her for a few seconds before he spoke. Primal, Miss Gray, thank you for coming, he finally greeted. Of course, I'm honored to receive your invitation, Grant replied. It's always a pleasure to be invited to your home, Vasily. It looks especially stunning tonight. Thank you, Primal, but I'm afraid I don't deserve much credit. You know, my Anna took care of all the renovations and decorating when we bought this place 50 years ago. The older Lycan's eyes softened, and Cady guessed that Anna was his late wife. I left everything the way it was when she passed, as she was always the expert in these matters. Dinner will be ready in 5 minutes, Garrett announced as he entered the room. Thank you, Garrett, Vasily said. Now why don't I introduce you quickly to our guests before we sit down? They are quite eager to meet you. Chapter 17. Nick took a sip of his wine, his eyes darting over the guests, and as always, he couldn't help but linger over one guest in particular. His grandfather was right. Cady looked stunning, especially under the low lights of the dining room. Her skin glowed under the soft lights, a light blush tinting her cheeks. Lips full and red, her auburn locks swept artfully aside. She was the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. And that dress. The moment she walked in, wearing that dress, all he could think of was dragging her upstairs, peeling it off of her and having his way with her in one of the bedrooms. She smiled and laughed and chatted with the people around her with ease and grace. He was surprised to see her, but he should have known since Grant always took her as a default date for Lycan functions, unless his mother was in town. And it really is a beautiful home, a twittery nasal voice said from his right. It's like that Pride and Prejudice movie. He was jolted out of his reverie by that voice, which was not the first time that night. Thank you, Constanza, he replied politely. Constanza Dantis was the daughter of one of Vasily's Lycan business partners from Eastern Europe, who had tagged along for this meeting. Of course he knew this was one of his grandfather's schemes, a way for him to meet a suitable Lycan girl. However, it was obvious that Vasily had never even or seen her. Sure, Constanza was beautiful and young, but she surely wasn't what Vasily was hoping for a granddaughter-in-law. Nick had gone to the private airstrip in Hudson with Vasily to pick up the delegation, and when she stepped out of the plane, she was teetering on 5-inch heels, paired with a short, bright yellow tight dress that barely covered her behind and showed off her ample breasts. Her platinum blonde hair was done up so well it didn't move, even in the slightest breeze, and the cloud of flowery perfume that followed her everywhere was so thick he couldn't tell what her scent was. Nick rode in the car with her, and all she did was complain about America and Americans, ignoring him the whole drive. The only time she did shut up was when they pulled into the mansion, and she couldn't stop talking about how big and beautiful it was, nor would she let go of his arm during the whole mini-tour Vasily had arranged. Her tone completely changed once she realized that there was a chance she could become the mistress of the mansion. It reminds me of this tour to England I went on with Papa last year. Let me tell you. He let her drone on and on about her travels and of course her complaints about the people, food, places, and smiled politely, not listening to a word she said. He let his eyes drift once again to Cady, who was talking to an older Lycan man, a former prince from Germany apparently. She laughed and smiled at a joke he told her, in German of course, which she spoke well enough, and the former prince's chest practically puffed up in pride as the young woman seemed to dote on him. A surge of jealousy went through Nick as he continued to watch them. Stop it, he told himself. He knew he was being ridiculous, yet he still wanted to beat the living daylights out of anyone who touched, looked, or even smiled at Cady, even Grant, who had walked into the drawing room with her on his arm. Finally, Vasily, who was at the head of the table, stood up. And now that dinner and dessert are over, I'd like to invite everyone to the music room for coffee, more dessert, drinks, and some special entertainment I arranged for this evening. Everyone got up and filed out of the dining room and made their way to the music room. The German prince offered his arm to Cady and she accepted. Nick, in turn, offered his arm to Constanza, who eagerly wrapped herself around him. Vasily had invited a famous Japanese pianist to perform for them this evening, along with a string quartet. The musicians were already set up, and after a few words from the pianist, they began to play. Everyone was seated on various chairs and chaises placed strategically around the musicians. Nick's eyes immediately zeroed in on Cady, who had chosen to stand near the fireplace all by herself. He turned his head back to the performers but kept Cady in the corner of his eye. The musicians were halfway through their second song when he noticed Cady slip away. He waited, then followed her quietly, hoping no one would notice. The redhead was halfway down the hallway leading to main receiving room when he caught up with her. Grabbing her hand, he pulled her quickly into the alcove under the stairs and pressed his hands over her mouth. Shook. "It's me," he said, removing his hand. As her eyes adjusted to the low light, her face lit up in a smile. "Nick," she said breathlessly. "I'm sorry, I didn't know. I should have texted or called. But it was last minute." "Sorry?" he asked, confused. "No, I'm glad you're here. I was surprised, but I should have known. Grant has no social life and no one else to take to these things." Alynna would have puked on his shoes before she let him drag her here. She laughed. "That's what I kept telling him." She stiffened when he drew her into an embrace, but then relaxed into his arms. "This feels so right," Nick thought. "Having her here. I missed you." He kissed the top of her head. "You just saw me this morning," she quipped, but moved closer into his embrace. "But I miss you too. I thought I wouldn't see you until tomorrow." "Well, this was kind of a last-minute thing. My grandfather conveniently forgot to tell me, until it was too late to say no." She pulled away and leaned back against the wall of the alcove. "Oh, right." Her face fell. "I'm sorry, I didn't want. Not that I didn't want you here, but I know what the old man is up to. She's barely left my side." Constanza. She had been introduced to the young Lycan earlier in the evening, who had merely given the redhead a cool nod and then dismissed her altogether. Yes. Her. He almost shuddered. I don't know what he was thinking. Constanza had shown up in an even shorter silver dress, more suitable to a club in Ibiza than a formal dinner party. "He's thinking she's got the right childbearing hips," Cady joked. "Really? It's okay. This isn't what I mean." He looked down at her face, inscrutable, but there was hurt in her eyes despite her objections. "I don't want you to have to deal with this." This was a reality we both knew was lurking around the corner, Cady stated. "We have to dash." Nick couldn't stand it anymore, and pressed his lips to hers. She moaned softly as he pressed his body against hers, pinning her against the wall, his arousal evident. He pressed his erection against her soft belly, letting her know how much he wanted her. Dragging his lips away from hers, he traced a path of kisses along her jawline, and then kissed the shell of her ear. "Come upstairs with me, Cady. Now." His voice was rough with need. "Here? With all those guests and your grandfather?" "I don't care." His hand slid up from her waist to her breasts, cupping them gently. His thumbs brushed over where her nipples were and she gasped. "We can't. You're growing wet thinking about it. I can smell you." Her scent and arousal mingled and was teasing his nose. "I can practically taste you." His other hand reached down and began to lift her dress, his fingers tracing up her creamy inner thighs. Someone clearing their throat politely interrupted them. "Master Nick, I believe the last concerto is about to end." Garrett's cool, collected voice cut through the air. "Perhaps it's time to head back to the music room." Nick took a deep breath and then banged his forehead on the wall behind Cady. "Thank you, Garrett." He leaned back, releasing Cady. Adjusting his pants, he turned to face the butler, whose face remained stoic. Cady, on the other hand, was red-faced with embarrassment. "And maybe Ms. Gray would like to use the powder room on the other side of the stairs? It's well stocked with cosmetics and other items she might be able to use to refresh herself." Cady squeaked her thanks and scampered away. "Thanks, Garrett," Nick said sarcastically. The old man gave Nick a knowing smile. "My pleasure." He turned around to go back to the kitchen but then turned back around. "May I ask, Master Nick, is She the reason you asked me to double your bread deliveries? Nick nodded. She said it's better than the French's. The old man beamed with pride, but said nothing as he walked away. Cady came back from the bathroom, arranging her hair and dress as she walked by. Okay, I think the amount of perfume I put on could possibly rival Constanza's, but it'll have to do. Thank goodness Jersey doesn't wrinkle. Nick sniffed the air, disappointed that she didn't smell like him anymore. But they didn't have a choice. She couldn't walk into a room full of Lycans, smelling like sex and him. You go in first and I'll follow. I'll tell Grandfather I had to run upstairs to get something from my room. Thanks, she nodded. Wait, he grabbed her arm. I can't leave tonight, I don't have a driver. But I'll drive up early tomorrow. Breakfast at your place. Sure, she smiled and then turned to walk back to the music room and join the rest of the guests. What did you think of Constanza? Vasily asked. It was the end of the evening. All the guests had either left or retired to their rooms. The two Vrost men were sitting in the library, having a last drink before bed. What did you think of her? Nick threw back the question. She needs some polishing. The older Lycan took a sip of his scotch. She drinks and parties too much, but I think once she settles down she'll be a good Lycan wife. He emphasized the last two words. And her father is richer than Midas. Not as rich as Grant Anderson, but well, it's too bad you didn't swoop in and marry his sister before that other one did. Grandfather, Alynna is about 13 years younger than me. Besides, that other 1 foot is her true mate, Nick remarked. Thinking about Alynna that way, it would be like marrying a sister. He put down his own glass, losing his taste for liquor. Right. He's smart, getting her pregnant as soon as he could, Vasily remarked. The younger man could only shake his head, not wanting to engage him further. Good night, Grandfather. Nick stood up and headed towards the door. Nikolai, he called as Nick was about to cross the threshold. Nick turned. Yes. Vasily's tone changed. I don't like the way you look at the human woman, the way your eyes follow her every move. I don't know what you mean. I'm old, not stupid. He took another sip of the amber liquid in his glass. You will not pursue this further. You already know she won't be able to give you what you want. You don't know what I want, Nick thought, but bit his tongue to prevent himself from saying it out loud. He gripped the wood of the door frame where he stood. Once you have produced my great-grandchild, you can do as you please, Vasily continued. Sleep with her, keep her as a mistress, I don't care. But not until then. I won't risk a suitable mate or her family refusing you because you cannot control your lust for a human. Like I said, good night. Nick turned away and walked out on his grandfather. Cady. A gentle voice and hand shook her awake. She opened her eyes and yawned. We're back, Grant said. Good thing there's no traffic at this time. Cady glanced at the watch on her phone. It was 1:45 a.m. and they did make it back to New York City in record time. Oh, thanks for waking me up, I'm just so tired. She got out of the town car with Grant's help. They were stopped in front of North Cluster. Don't come in till after 10 tomorrow, okay? Grant ordered as he got back into the car. Work from home in your pajamas if you want, but I'll bar you from the lobby if I have to. Yes, Dad. She snickered and waved goodbye as the car drove towards Center Court. Walking into the building, she waved at the doorman and headed to the elevators. As she prepared for bed, she heard a chirping sound from her phone. Who could be calling me at this hour? Maybe it was Nick? No, he should be in bed by now if he wanted to leave by 5 a.m. Taking her phone out of her purse, she frowned at the number unknown on the caller ID. Hello, she answered. Cady, dear. Victoria greeted her. It's me, your mother. What do you want, Victoria? She asked impatiently. I don't have time for your games. Oh, but you have time for your precious Lycans coming home so late? Are you watching me? She asked in a venomous tone. How can you even get close enough? The enclave was guarded by magic, which made anyone who walked by simply ignore or forget they had even seen the Lycan stronghold. My dear, her mother sneered. The enclave is protected by a witch's magic, which doesn't always work on other witches and powered beings. What do you want? She asked again. Come meet with me. Now. Cady sat down on the couch. Why should I? Because if you don't, I'll make a scene at Fenrir and then you can't ignore me, Victoria threatened. Just come to the diner on Madison and 59th now. All I want to do is talk. And if you don't like what I have to say, I promise. It will be the last you hear from me. Her mother sounded strange, like she was sad. Or frightened. All right, Cady relented. If I listen to you, do you promise to leave me alone? I'll talk and you listen. After you hear what I have to say, you can decide if you want me in your life. She paused. Fine. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Thank you, Cady. And the line went dead. What could Victoria want? Why did she threaten to reveal her secret and then turn around and tell her she'd get out of her life? Cady shook her head and went to her closet to find something appropriate to wear. It didn't matter. The only thing that did was that Victoria would be out of her life soon. Enough. Cady waited for almost an hour, drinking bad coffee and waving away the young, tired-looking waitress several times. I should have known. The hands on the clock over the door pointed at 3:12. Victoria wasn't late, she just didn't show up. She duped Cady and that was that. Disgusted, the redhead dropped some bills on the table and left the diner, waving a passing cab to take her back to the enclave. All she wanted was a shower, bed, and then Nick to come to her in the morning.